From the very beginning, our nation has dealt with many issues that have resulted in positive consequences. Although there has been many mistakes made, we have learned from our past and have done our best to try and not have history repeat itself. In this video, we will be explaining how many of the issues that have occurred in the U.S. have resulted in a positive outcome.
When the United States was still a part of Britain, they were controlled under a monarchy. King George III abused his power and did not take into consideration the citizens' thoughts. Once the United States became their own nation and created the Constitution, they made a system called the three branches of government. There is an executive branch who proposes laws, commands the army, controls foreign policy, and makes treaties. The other separation of power belongs to the legislative branch, who writes the laws, approves treaties, grants money, and declares war. The last branch is called the judicial branch, and they interpret the Constitution and review lower court decisions. Within these branches of government, there was a system of checks and balances. This made sure that no branch in government could abuse their power. Every branch was able to have control in some way over the other branches. The legislative branch had the ability to impeach the president or impeach judges from the Supreme Court. The executive branch can nominate judges and can veto Congress's laws. The judicial branch can declare laws unconstitutional and can declare executive acts unconstitutional.
The colonies have been disagreeing with the lack of representation within Parliament that they have received. Because of this, they began protests such as the Boston Tea Act. They sent petitions, boycotts, mock hangings, burn in effigy, and tar and feather. Britain did not believe they had the right to say things that went against the government. Therefore, the colonies would be punished for their actions. The colonies felt that in order for Britain to listen to their wants, they had to protest and make a statement. Once the United States broke apart from Britain, they had to make sure if citizens wanted something, they were allowed to express their opinions. When the Constitution was originally written, states were worried that their rights were not protected and would not agree on ratifying the Constitution. The government then created a set of amendments to comply with the states' wants, one of them being the First Amendment. The First Amendment allowed for citizens to speak, assemble, petition, and practice their religion freely as long as it didn't go against the government. Although it was difficult when colonists were not allowed to express their opinions, we now have a system where people can express their opinions without any punishment.
When the U.S. had first started, we had created a system of government that was too weak for our needs, and because of this, we created the Constitution. The first way of government that we had tried was the Articles of Confederation. It gave most of the power to the states, which resulted in there being no authority. Although Congress had the power to declare war, there wasn't a way to draft soldiers, so when the nation needed security, there was none provided. Also, there was no judicial system, so any disputes would not be settled, and there was no way to collect taxes from the states. As a result of this, our economy was failing rapidly, and we had to come up with a solution. This led to the creation of the Constitution. It provided the federal government with much more power, but still gave the states some rights. The Constitution divided the power into three different branches: judicial, executive, and legislative. This balanced the power between everyone and led to the way of life that we all have now.
After the U.S. had settled in, more land was either being bought or discovered, and new ideas were being come upon. During this time of thought, Manifest Destiny erupted. This was the belief that the U.S. had the right and the duty to claim all land west of them and to the border of the Pacific Ocean. During this journey, travelers from the U.S. crossed over into the westward territory and gathered new information about the land and how it works. This benefited us in a way because it helped us create tools and discover new land that would bring resources never used by the U.S. to our plate. Some specific tools that were created were the telegraph, barbed wire, steamboats, and railroads. The telegraph was used for creating messages that could be sent to another area to relay a message. Barbed wire was created as a defense mechanism to ward off enemies and often used in war. The railroads and steamboats created during this time were used for transporting goods and the people to other areas of land. The major issue was how difficult it was to travel west without losing all of their travelers. It was a harsh journey, but in the end, it had helped the U.S. in so many ways. Completing Manifest Destiny expanded trade, communication, and transportation, which also had a positive effect on the U.S. and still affects us today.
After westward expansion was completed, sectionalism furthered even more. Deciding slave states had been a major issue for the country because they could not have an uneven number of states to make decisions in Congress. If there were more slave states, then there would be more votes in favor of slavery. The same thing would happen if there were more free states in Congress. The majority of the time, slave states were decided free, giving the North the advantage. Once the Republican Party had evolved and Abraham Lincoln, who were both against slavery, became president, the South felt that they had no chance of retaining their way of life. This led them to recede from the United States and eventually evolving into a civil war. Around 620,000 American casualties resulted from this war and was a devastating loss for the American nation. Once the war had ended, there were some positive outcomes from Reconstruction. Slaves had been freed. All men, including blacks, were allowed to vote, and anyone born in the United States was considered a citizen. Even though many soldiers had died from disease in hospitals, medical advances had occurred, such as the efficiency of how the hospital is run and the field of nursing expanded. The Red Cross Foundation was established, which is still active today, helping many people around the world. The grief from the war pulled the nation together and helped us realize that in order to be prosperous, we have to stick together.